Choosing a school for your child. I mean, it's one of the biggest, most stressful decisions any parent in Malaysia has to make, right? You want what's best for them, of course, but the options, the costs, the endless debates, it can all feel so overwhelming. Well, today, we're going to break it all down. So, this is the big question, isn't it? Public, private, or international? Do you stick with the familiar government school system, or is it really worth stretching the family budget for something different? Look, there's no single right answer for everyone, but by the end of this explainer, you're going to have a much, much clearer picture. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll quickly run through how the school system actually works. Then we'll get into the numbers, the real cost of education. After that, we'll dive headfirst into that big public versus international school debate, see what reforms are happening, and finally, try to figure out the verdict for your family. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics. What does the whole education journey in Malaysia even look like from start to finish? So the path is pretty straightforward. It all kicks off with 6 years of primary school, which has been compulsory since 2003. Then it's on to 5 years of secondary school. After that, you've got pre-university options like Form 6 or matriculation. And within this whole system, you've got different school types. You have your main national schools, or SKs, but also the vernacular schools, the SJKCs and SJKTs, plus religious schools, private schools, and of course, a whole bunch of international schools popping up everywhere. All right, now for the topic that keeps a lot of parents awake at night, the money. Let's talk about the real cost of putting one child through 17 years of school in Malaysia. But first, a super quick definition so we're all on the same page. When we talk about cost, there are really two types. The social cost is what the government pays for using our tax money. The private cost, well, that's what comes directly out of your wallet. We're talking books, transport, pocket money, and all those extra tuition classes. This is the number that really hits the family budget. So, what's the final bill? A major study calculated the total private cost to take one child from Standard 1 all the way through to a local university degree. And the number is, well, it's pretty staggering. Nearly 117,000 ringgit. And here's the real kicker. This is for the national school pathway. It's proof that even so-called free education comes with a very real six-figure price tag for parents. Now, let's break that down a bit. As you can see, the costs really start to climb over time. You're looking at roughly RM11,000 for 6 years of primary school, and then it jumps to almost 18,000 for 5 years of secondary. But the big one, the real leap, is university. Even at a public institution, a family can expect to fork out over $64,000 out of pocket for a 4-year degree. Wow. So where on earth is all this money going? Let's zoom in on secondary school. You know what's surprising? The biggest chunk of the cost, at 38%, isn't books or fees. It's pocket money for daily expenses, food, drinks, things like that. Add transportation, which is another 25%, and you suddenly realize that more than half the cost has nothing to do with academics. It's just the day-to-day logistics of getting your kid to school and making sure they're fed. If this breakdown is giving you a clearer picture, do us a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button. That way, you'll always stay one step ahead on Malaysia's biggest issues. Okay, so now that we've got our heads around the costs, we can finally tackle the great debate, the one so many Malaysian families are having right now. Stick with a government school or take the massive financial leap to an international one. On one side of the argument, you hear these powerful stories, like this one from a student who was really struggling in the national system, but then found themselves thriving in an international school. They point to better teaching, more support, a better environment, and for them, all those things made the high fees totally worth it. But then there's the other side of the coin. This person argues that international schools are basically a business, and when parents are paying customers, standards can get a little soft. They also bring up a really valid point about social bubbles, that kids might only ever mix with other kids from similar wealthy backgrounds. Is that really preparing them for the real Malaysia? So let's just summarize this showdown. In government schools, teacher quality can sometimes feel like a lottery, and the learning style is often focused on memorizing things for exams. But the huge advantage is the low direct cost. On the flip side, in international schools, you often get more structured teaching and a focus on critical thinking. But, and it's a big but, the cost is absolutely astronomical, and you might have to deal with that whole rich kid culture. Now, with all this debate and criticism, you have to wonder,
Is the national system just standing still? Well, no. There have been some major reforms. So the real question is, are things actually changing for the better?
If you look at the last decade, there's been a clear shift away from those super stressful, high-stakes exams. Remember PMR? That was phased out back in 2014. But the really huge change came in 2021, when the government completely abolished UPSR for Standard 6 students. The focus now is more on continuous, school-based assessments, what they call UASA. So why the big change? Well, a major trigger was our performance on the world stage. PISA is this big global test that measures how well students can apply what they know. And Malaysia's scores, well, they've been slipping. It was a serious wake-up call that the old system of just memorizing facts wasn't really preparing our students for real-world problem solving. And this shift is really at the heart of the new KSSR curriculum. The goal is to move towards a system that's more focused on the student, on critical thinking, on digital skills, and on improving English. The whole idea is to create graduates who can actually think for themselves, not just spit back facts for an exam. A great example of this in action is the Dual Language Program, or DLP. Basically, in certain schools, parents can choose to have their kids taught subjects like science and maths in English. The goal is simple: make our graduates stronger in English so they're more competitive in a global economy. Okay, we've gone through the system, the costs, the big debate, and the newer forms. So where does all of this leave you, the parent trying to make a choice? What's the final verdict? Well, it seems to me that it really boils down to this. The choice between public, private, or international school is a trade-off. It's about finding a balance between what you can actually afford, the kind of social and cultural environment you want for your child, and what you believe is the best quality of education they can get. There really is no one-size-fits-all answer here. We really hope this explainer has helped bring some clarity to a super complicated topic. If it has, why not join thousands of other Malaysians who want clarity, not confusion? Just tap like, hit subscribe, and let's keep making sense of these big issues together. And we'll leave you with one final question to think about. As our country and the world keep changing so fast, what kind of education system, what kind of learning, what kind of skills is actually going to prepare our children for the future that's waiting for them? We'd love to know what you think in the comments below.